Okay. So what else do I want to do before we kick start? Perhaps I should. Yeah, okay. I think we're all set. And off we go. I think perhaps I should do something with the glasses. Okay. Okay. And we'll have to record the class. This is class number what? Any idea? This is 7? Yeah. Okay, so this is class 7. Let me record it. So I'll write Dr. Sama, and I'll also write class 7, and off we go. We're being recorded as usual. Okay, so what we have today, or tonight rather, it's the beach of or at Falesa. Okay, so what is it all about? It's a continuation of the efforts that we have started with Wuthering Heights. We're talking about the concepts of home and abroad, and we're going to look at these concepts against this. I don't want to call it a short story because it's obviously bigger than a short story. It's more of a novella, because we cannot also fit it into perhaps the parameters of full-fledged novels. Because if you compare it to Wuthering Heights in terms of size, this is, the beach of Falesa is obviously nothing if you compare it to Wuthering Heights, right? Hi, Yara. Oh, okay. So, do you guys have questions before we start? And obviously, somebody is okay. No questions. Okay. So, tell me about. You guys are supposed to be reading and studying, and at the same time, you're working on and completing your TMAs. So tell me about the TMAs and how far did you go with them? Any breakthroughs when it comes to the TMA? Have you, by any chance, finished? Okay. Okay. And Noor is saying that she is a bit confused. So it's good that you're a bit confused. You're not completely confused. Okay. Uh, Let me. Kamar is saying that I finished researching and looking for resources, and as of now, the obstacles and the challenges would be the normal kind of stuff, right? So, okay, so what is it that you're confused about, ya Marwa? Tell us about what confuses you, and we may perhaps clear up the confusion for you before we get started. This applies to everyone. If you guys have any concerns or questions, now is the time. Nora is saying, what is the main point that the TMA wants? This is a big question, and we shouldn't answer questions as big as this, because it depends on how you understand the question, and it also depends on your perspective, how you see stuff, and how you're going to reflect it in the TMA. Okay, we shouldn't, as a matter of fact, have identical TMAs. You give it your perspective. Okay, if it's about women characters, for example, so you see, look at the characters and see how they act and react. And I assure you, your perspective and what you write should be different from other people, and they are all acceptable. I mean, as long as you can support your ideas from within the novel and from outside the novel, or the novels rather. Okay? For I cannot think for you. I cannot give you ideas. I mean, you have to dig for ideas yourself. Okay? Otherwise, people are going to be under the impression that what I say would be the only, I mean, truth there is in the novels. No, we should, like I said, think deep about what is going on. You've been attending classes, you know what the novels are all about, and you work on these things. And like I said, in literature, we don't have right or wrong. Okay, it's all correct, it's all right, as long as you are starting an argument and you're going about defending the argument, or providing evidence as how it should go the way you think it should. Okay. Well, yeah, one concern that some of you have, uh, um, and this is raised up by Kamar, would be the idea of word count. People, whenever people start, they normally start big. You may end up having or exceeding the word limit, you know, yeah, much. Okay, which is fine because this is your first draft. But when you yourself get to read your draft for the second time, you're going to find that there are whole paragraphs that you wouldn't need. Try to resist the temptation to write. Okay, so people sometimes write profusely. Profusely means that they write abundantly. They cannot resist the urge to write and overwrite. They think, or they are actually under the false impression that the more they write, the better they are, which is obviously a wrong assumption. Okay, so it's very natural to start off writing so many things, and then you that's why we have this stage that we call editing and proofreading. When you edit and proofread, you start to reconsider lots of the ideas that you're sharing or writing about, and you think are not relevant. So it's about relevance. Okay, it's about priorities. You can have so many relevant ideas, and even among those relevant ideas, you can find irrelevant ideas. Okay, so you need to filter down and narrow down the focus so that you end up within the space or the count limits given to you. And there is obviously nothing wrong with exceeding the word limit with perhaps 50 or 100 more words. I would accept that. I don't have a problem with it. Okay, provided that the part that you're adding makes sense and it adds value to what you're writing about. Don't give me the author and her biography or his biography, and he was having, I don't know, mental issues, or he has family problems. No, we don't want that. Focus on what is required. Okay? Focus on the bottom line, in other words. Okay? Am I making sense? One thing you need to be clear about is that you shouldn't be afraid of anything. It's all experimentation that we're doing. We don't have perfect TMAs. Okay. Um, there is always room for improvement, and this is what you do moving from one course to another. You're just, it's a workshop where you are learning in. You make errors and mistakes, and then your teacher tells you about them, and you are on your way. You move on, you correct yourself, you change the direction a little bit. This is what TMAs are all about. Okay. And we're not too harsh when it comes to, I mean, we know that you are in your formative years, you're developing. Okay. It's not a finished product that you're doing. It's an open source, more or less, where you can always edit stuff. Your stuff is always editable, because there is always new, there is always new ideas and new. So you shouldn't be scared of anything. Just do what you're supposed to do. Read very well. Read the question very well. Okay. Start engage in conversation with the TMA and come up with conclusions. Okay. Narrow down your expectations yourself. Like sometimes you yourself um, have very big expectations when it comes to ideas and developing ideas. Try to be intellectually humble or modest when it comes to ideas. Don't write everything, because TMAs are not about writing everything. TMAs are not about reproducing what other people are saying. No, it's not about that. TMAs are about, originality, how original you are. Okay, you have two or three ideas and you develop them into a good essay. Okay, try your best and hope for the best. How about that? Any more questions before I proceed? Okay, obviously no more questions. Okay, so did you read the novel, the new one, or novella rather? Okay, so Kamar did. How about everybody else? Fahd is saying yes, that's good. One chapter left, that's good. Thank you, Fahd. Who else? I can't answer this question, Nabila. Depends on how you see things. I'm not you and you are not me, right? But you have to, I mean, I can simply say that you have to provide examples, right? It's different. You are the one who is going to build the argument, and you are the one that is going to set the requirements. You decide on the requirements based on what direction you're taking your essay to, or towards. Okay, Sarah Al-Hariri hasn't finished yet, but she's halfway through, perhaps. That's good. Okay. Like we always do, we always compare and contrast the different works that we do. What happens if we start to compare? I mean, let's compare them. Let's compare the sign of, I mean, the beach of Falesa to the other two works. You can find them. I can always share them on the LMS. Yeah, Mona. We can always share them on the LMS. Okay. طيب. Again, so if you set The Beach of Falesa or at Falesa against the other two novels. What do you have to say about this one? By the way, the mic is is enabled, and if you want to talk, you can always raise your hand, and I can allow you. Okay. What about it? Al-Ustaz is saying yeah, okay. Kamar is saying, I personally had some difficulties reading. I'd say it starts a bit confusing. Okay, type, let me take up this thread. Is it the language or the events that are confusing? Kamar. Kamar is saying that she had difficulties reading the novel at times. And my question was whether the confusion stems from the language itself or from the events. And I am obviously waiting for an answer from Kamar. A mix of both. And Kamar is saying that events would be more challenging than the language. Okay. Does anybody share the sentiment with Kamar? Does anybody share the same feelings when it comes? The Ustaz is saying the British trader who traveled to Samau to marry native island. Okay. So obviously you're summing up the idea. Which is not what I want at this point in time. Let's focus on. Let's keep the thread that Kamar started. I would like to check whether you are sharing with her the same feeling or impression that the language gets confusing, that the events get entangled, and Kamar is saying the language was confusing, yes, but at the end of the book there is a glossary. Okay. Okay, having a glossary is in and of itself an indication that you are encountering difficulties, right? Okay. Let me ask you, from your experience with the novel, why is the language not accessible? Isn't that English? Al-Ustaz is saying the novel uses complicated and obscure vocabulary. I like this idea of obscure and complicated. Okay, let's focus on obscure. Obscure means that it is strange, right? If you compare it to the language of, for example, Doyle, or even the language of Bronte, it would be a little bit challenging, right? Okay. Right. I'll tell you why, and this is not a secret that I'm sharing with you. You already know about it. The language at times the language turns to what we call pidgin English. Okay, so pidgin English is the language that is used in part of the book. Okay, so what do I mean by pidgin English? Pidgin English is not pure English. It's normally a mixture or a mix between local languages and standard English. It's a cocktail, if you like, of local languages and the English language, right? So it's not purely native language, the language of the natives, and it's not pure standard English or pure English, right? Why do we have that? And why don't we have standard English? why doesn't the writer write in standard English? If the writer writes, I mean, you cannot imagine locals like the one that you have seen in the novel speak standard English, right? It would take away from the realism of the novella or the work, right? So if you write, if the writer had written the whole work in standard British English, people wouldn't be convinced. The problem is also is that Stevenson keeps telling people that this is reality. He wants to put you, or to make you believe that what happened, and that these characters are real and realistic characters. In order to capture that, even the language has to be different, right? So locals would speak English, it is okay, they can speak English, but with a heavy accent, with difficult or confusing vocab items, vocab that you wouldn't understand, you have to think about. Okay? So again, there is an illusion of reality that Stevenson is trying to sustain all through. And he cannot sustain it unless he gives you things that indicate that this is reality that he is depicting and nothing else. One way would be the use of pidgin English, and pidgin English is a mix between standard English and the languages of the locals back there in the islands. Okay? So this would explain why sometimes it gets difficult, because this is not standard English. You're not used to this kind of language, right? Do I make sense? So this is reproducing the language that people speak over there on the islands. Otherwise, you wouldn't be convinced. If he tells you that this is a realistic novel, you say no, it's not realistic. What is so realistic about it? If locals who never tread on British soil speak like native British people or native English people, no, this is not reality. I'm sorry. Okay. So again, that would explain the confusion that Kamar and others were suffering from, or were experiencing and seeing in the novel. Right? What else caught your fancy in the novel? What else do you still remember about the novel that had perhaps a hold on you? Good or bad, of course. Uh, Kamar is saying the idea of taboo. In what sense? In what way? Hmm. Okay. Okay. So you know what taboo subjects are? Uh, Taboo means it's something that you shouldn't talk about or you shouldn't exercise. Okay, at one point, people and somehow. Okay, let me check. I'm not sure I understand the Qamar, but it's okay. Uh, okay, like Fahd is saying, taboo things and taboo topics are topics that society deems unacceptable, things that you're not supposed to talk about. So it can be topics and it can also be practices. So what taboos have we seen in the novel? What seemed to be a taboo at the beginning? Look at the relationship between, yes, Uma and Wiltshire. They got married, and obviously this was a sort of taboo for the natives, for the locals at one point, right? Yes, and it's taboo on either side. I mean, even English people, if you kind of, I mean, Victorian readers wouldn't be happy about this kind of marriage, right? Because they think that they are more advanced, that they are, you know, better and superior and everything in between, right? Even the locals wouldn't find it interesting for one of their daughters to get married to a foreigner. You always have this in cultures, unless you keep an open mind and everything, and this is not happening, or it doesn't happen easily between and among cultures. Okay. So as you can see, the novel, short as it is, has a lot of ideas. Okay. So the fact that it is short does not mean that it is, you know, light or not philosophical, or it doesn't address issues. It does address issues, right? As you can see. So let's talk about some of the issues that you think the the writer is trying to kind of get across to us, to address. Now, from your experience with novels that are mainstream, whether we're talking about Wuthering Heights or The Sign of Four or The Sign of the Four, do you think, would you consider The Beach of Falesa, would you consider it a mainstream novel? No, it's not. It's not. So what's your definition? What are the parameters of mainstream? Okay, if you're going to make a list of what is mainstream and what is not mainstream, what items would you include? What are the requirements for mainstreamness, if you like? I'm giving you a novel and I'm saying, please, I would like you to check whether this is mainstream or not. So what requirements would you need for a novel to be eligible for mainstreamness, if you like? Okay, so Kamar is saying a setting that people find familiar. Okay, so the setting has to be familiar. Okay. Familiar to whom, ya Kamar? Who decides on this idea of familiarity that you raised? Okay, what people? Okay, okay. Let's talk about the list, and then perhaps we can discuss them one at a time. So a setting that is familiar, characters that you can relate to. That's good. Okay. So familiar characters, in other words, and we also need to define what we mean by familiar characters. What else? I mean, even the topics and the issues. Yeah, Fahd is saying relatable events. That's true. Yes. The issues and the topics addressed should be also. So familiarity is a key word, right? I would tweak it a little bit and change familiarity, and I use the word home instead. So you have to be at home with the novel or the novella, right? At home with the associations of at home that we have been talking about for the past 3 weeks. Do you agree with that? Okay. So familiar settings. Do we have familiar settings in the beach of Felisa or Felisa? No. Okay. It falls short of this requirement. Familiar characters. Do we have familiar characters? Not all of them, except for Wiltshire and Kaysen, right? Okay. Familiar events. Familiar events in the sense perhaps you if it's a detective novel or short story where we have a detective who is investigating a case, that would be familiar. If you're talking about love relationships where two people are trying to perhaps get married and there are obstacles uh, uh, um, in the way and they end up reconciled, this is also familiar. Do you have any of that? This is, yeah, okay, that would add to the unfamiliarity that the obviously the novel is plagued with, right? Okay, so if you don't have any of that and a dash extra obviously, what do you expect the English reader uh, how do you think they will react, I mean English readers, when they read a novel like this one? What do you think? I mean, try to put yourself in their position, and of course, you know what they are trained in terms of decorum, in terms of conventions, right? What do you think the reception will be? Is it going to be favorable? Are they going to be happy about it? Yeah, Nof is saying that they wouldn't be comfortable. So reception is going to be negative. Yeah, Nof is saying this is so foreign to them. This is the abroad aspect of the novel. The novel is more abroad than home, if you like. Okay? If you read secondary sources about the novel, critical material, you're going to find that the reaction was very negative. They even they would tout Stevenson and say that he went native. At one point they would say that he went native. Native here means, of course, people other than mainstream British people, people in the colonies, whether in India or in the South Pacific. They jokingly and sarcastically would refer to him, saying he went native. And if you go native, it means that your creative powers are going to diminish and they are going to be less. Okay? Are you getting the idea? again, it's a great deal that is foreign to the sensibility or the sensibilities of the Victorians at the time. The setting is unfamiliar. The relationships between the characters are unfamiliar. Some of the characters are unfamiliar, right? The end result is that you have a novel that is more abroad than home. Okay? And if we judge by the standards of the Victorians, the novel is a flop, is a fiasco, is not to the liking of the English, whether they are critics or reading public. Are you getting the idea? Okay. Okay. Look at the first two words. Originally censored by its British publisher. Censored means you have a novel, a work of art, and you go to a publisher and listen, I want to publish this. Okay, and he says, no, I cannot. Why? Because of this and that. Because of what we have, of all what we have said about the novel. This sense of approach to it, the fact that it is quite unfamiliar in the delineation of characters, in its foreign setting, in those strange connections and relationships between the characters, right? It has a sense of the uncanny to it, like Sarah is saying. Was it Sarah? Yes, Sarah. Okay. So originally censored by its British publisher, The Beach at Falesa is a scathing critique of colonialism and economic imperialism that bravely takes on many of the 19th century's strongest taboos. Okay? So it's obviously it's not only the setting that it's strange. It's not only the characters and their relationships, even the ideas that Stevenson is addressing are also, I wouldn't say unfamiliar, but these were kind of taboos, like Kamar was saying. Taboos means that, I mean, whenever you touch on them, people say, no, please steer away from them. Avoid talking about colonialism. Avoid talking about miscegenation, for example, the interracial marriages. No, this is a taboo. Nobody would welcome the idea of having two individuals from two different races getting married to each other. No, don't talk about these things. Okay? But he did. And why did he do that? Was he perhaps naive or unconscious? No, he meant it. This is a critique. A critique means that it has some kind of criticism that he is leveling against the British society and British government. Obviously, he was not too happy with this sense of expansion, imperial expansion, and the exploitation of people from other races and from other countries, looting their treasures, taking and transferring their treasures to London and other places in Europe. Obviously, he wasn't happy about that. So the novel is having all of that. It is an attack on these ideas. So how does he do that? Through a story, through a plot that features a surprising and beguiling romance between an adventurous British trader and a young island girl. Okay? So this is the main idea, the fact that we somehow, I haven't seen any romances, all of a sudden we found that Wiltshire is set up I mean, the two couple are set up and they're getting married. I haven't seen any courting or any wooing on either part, unless you want to correct me. So again, we have perhaps they develop romance. I mean, sometimes love can come after marriage. So this is what we have: a surprising and beguiling romance between an adventurous British trader and a young island girl. Is that acceptable, everyone? No. Against a background of increasing and mysterious hostility. Who is representing hostility and aggression and violence in the novel? No, not really. No, no. If you're being too harsh on the natives, yeah, no. White traders like Case, for example, right? And he happens to be white, which tells you a great deal. They wouldn't. I mean, even natives, even if they are violent, they wouldn't be violent if you don't go to them and you try to loot their treasures, like what happened with the Indians in the Sign of the Four. Why would the Indians in the Sign of the Four take up arms against the English? Why did they go there in the first place? I mean, the English, right? You don't go there, right? And you don't try to exploit me economically and everything. And then when I react, perhaps violently, you go and complain. I say, this is violent, this is savage, you guys are this, you guys are uneducated. Why did you come to us in the first place? Are you getting the idea? Okay. So it is a story that deftly combines the form of the exotic adventure yarn with the moral and psychological questing of great fiction. Exotic. When I said that this novel is exotic, what comes to your mind? So it's not mainstream. Whatever is exotic is not mainstream. Make no mistake about it. Right? I mean, exotic would no. I wouldn't describe exotic. I wouldn't equate it with extremity. Exotic gives you the associations of a place very far away, far flown, and you have, I mean, different colors. I mean, different behavior. Okay, foreign. Yes, foreign can. Yeah. Yeah, foreign. The word unique is positive, ya Kamar, while foreign would be more befitting of what people think. So foreign to your sensibilities, foreign to your traditions, foreign to your behavior and everything. So, how much do we know about Stevenson himself? So, did you do any research on Stevenson? Yes. Let's talk about his biography for a bit. Mm. He's English, right? He's British. I wouldn't say he's English. He's British. He is Scottish, like Doyle, novelist and poet, right? I'm sure you're familiar with Treasure Island. Treasure Island was such, or has always been such a beautiful kid literature, right? Okay, so in terms of economic status, he was well off, he was fine. He has bouts of illness. I mean, he was perhaps sick for a substantial part of his life, and that would not allow him to go out and mix with, I mean, kids um, and peers like him. And that would allow him the opportunity to perhaps spend hours upon hours reading and okay. So sometimes staying at home, not doing anything that you normally do outdoor would be a blessing in disguise. Like now, for example, we're staying at home most of the time, and perhaps people can start to tap into their hidden potential. Some people may turn musical, some people may write poetry. Okay, it's normally staying at home can be a time of self-reflection. You reflect on what you have. Perhaps you didn't have the opportunity or the chance or the time to kind of do this inner exploration. Have you done any of that? Have you discovered talents that were hidden from you? Of course, together with the talents of washing up and and cooking and right, and picking up fights at the least provocation. Yeah, right. Sarah is saying that she started perhaps drawing or sketching. Nice. Who else did what? Kamar. She started writing poetry, mashallah. Good. Nice. Okay. Interesting. See? Hala is now painting and lettering. Lettering, what do you mean by lettering? You write letters? Yeah, painting. Okay. Sheikh has discovered that sleeping is the best of all possible hobbies and interests. Okay. Arsh is engaged in calligraphy. Yes, that's good. See how beautiful that is. Okay. So Stevenson had that due to his illness. He wouldn't have access to the outside world. He would focus his energies on perhaps reading. And the next thing you know is that we have a great writer. At one point, he was a great children literature writer, and at another, he was also a great poet. Uh, Hala is explaining. No, lettering means writing quotations. Yeah, business. Yeah, you mean business quotations, right? That's interesting, Hala. Okay, good. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, let's go back to Stevenson. So he was very popular among all levels of society, whether you're talking about kids or mature individuals like us. So it was only natural that people get amazed and surprised when he leaves everything behind and go to the Pacific Ocean islands, to the South Seas, and start from scratch. Yeah, he started from scratch because he even the techniques that he was so used to are no longer appealing to him. He says, no, I'm not going to use those traditional and conventional and very English and very British techniques anymore. I'm going to use my own. And at the core of the new techniques that he was using was realism. So realism as he sees it, not as the English people at the time saw it. Realism as he sees implemented on these islands. So it's obviously it's a different type of realism, where the focus is on the natives, where the focus is on their languages, where the focus is on their interactions. These are topics and ideas that are so foreign to the British sensibilities of the time. Hence the attack that was mounted or leveled against him, right? Lots of things. I mean, he left a legacy, a real legacy, before he went to the South Seas. He left something. He was recognized by everybody. For somebody to leave this, to leave everything behind and go start a new life, this was in and of itself unfamiliar and strange, and would add to the unfamiliar atmosphere that he is even creating in his novels. Okay. So Stevenson's immigration to Samau and his settlement in Vilma is obviously a place over there, generated both positive and negative reactions. But for the most part, I promise you, it was negative. Stevenson became the exotic, romantic writer-traveler like Lord Byron and Shelley. I mean, they would compare him to Lord Byron and Shelley. And of course, you know from your previous courses that Lord Byron was romantic and Shelley was a romantic poet too. And when you look at their poetry is normally set in foreign places. In Shelley's case, you normally have Italy, for example. In Lord Byron's case, remember, we have spoken about Lord Byron when we spoke about the character of Heathcliff and how strange he is. And we said that Heathcliff was a Byronic figure. Byronic because he is strange, he is weird. So this is typical of Byron, to have characters who, that are not English, that are not mainstream, that are exotic. Okay, so now Stevenson is compared to Byron. They are saying that he is Byronic in the sense that his characters are the characters of the natives, people who live very far, thousands of miles away from home, from England or from Britain, right? His immigration intensified the Victorian anxieties about propriety, both morally and literally. Yeah, this is also. So to have a mainstream writer like Stevenson, to have a canonized writer that everybody likes, to have him turn his back on the literary scene in England and go all the way to foreign places and write about these foreign places. This was a shock, right? So this was a shock. If 2 or 3 or 4 other writers would do that, it would be a problem. So this intensified their anxiety. I mean, where are we headed? Why is he acting the way he does? Okay. Stevenson, like I said, they kept saying that he is this is taunting, or this is doubting, when you kind of make fun of somebody. They would say he went native, or he's going native. I mean, native, according to them, had negative associations. So if you're native, it means that you're not white, you're not blonde, you're not green-eyed, you're not blue-eyed, you're not Christian. And if you're not any of these things, it means that you're bad in their eyes, right? So going native means that he is now becoming native himself. He behaves like them, he acts like them, he even speaks like them as given in his novels. He's using pidgin English like them. And of course, this is all frowned upon. This is all not accepted by the people of the English people of the time. Some of his friends, writers and critics, among them would be Sidney Colvin and Henry James, thought that his migration negatively affected his writings. They said, yeah, he went there, and obviously the culture over there in the islands had a negative influence on his writing. He's no longer the high and mighty Robert Stevenson that we are familiar with. Okay. Of course, he's going to defend himself, and he's going to say, listen, I'm happy there, and I'm experimenting and writing things that I like, and my concept of realism is different from yours, obviously. They kept kind of attacking him, and they would say that this guy has such a fascination with island life, and this was considered as evidence of decline. Um, his exposure to a foreign land and his repudiation of Western culture. They said this is what we see in his novels. Since he left, this is what we see. We see too much exposure to foreign land, too much negative referencing to British culture and Western culture in general. And these were signs of decline for them. These were artistic signs of decline for them. He totally immersed himself in the culture of the islands. He speaks their language, he uses their grammar, he even falls back and goes back to their mythical heritage and traditions for inspiration. Okay. So in the Beach of Falesa, Stevenson was attempting something new in his literary career. That change of environment and his encounters with a new and developing Pacific society meant that for the first time he started writing stories that could be described as realist or realistic. This is what he deems realism. It might not agree with other people's concept of realism, but this is how he sees realism. He sees realism in reproducing and creating lifelike characters. If he is in the Pacific Ocean islands, he has to recapture this sense over there in terms of characters, in terms of topics, and all these other things. Okay, I'll give you 5 minutes. And go and pray, and then when we come back, we can always pick up what we are leaving off now. Okay. So I'll see you in 5 minutes, inshallah. Hello. I'm back. Okay. Are we all back? Okay, good. So as you can see, this is interesting because as you can see, we have a total deviation uh, um, and moving away from standards, from conventions and traditions, right? So the Beach of Falesa was the first realistic South Sea story with realistic South Sea characters and details of life. Stevenson took great pains to make his representation of island life as accurate as possible. Basic many of the attitudes, practices, beliefs, and aspirations of the islanders on the Samoans whom he interacted with on a daily basis. So it's about reproducing reality, real reality, if you like, okay, and being as accurate as you can, yani you can possibly be, okay. It's a new reality because the characters are not no longer British characters that you can identify with as a Victorian reader. No. So it's a new kind of reality that not so many people are happy about or with. So as the story opens, this is obviously the plot, and the plot is simple, right? You don't see much originality when it comes to the plot. Originality with the characters, the types of characters, right? But not with the plots. It's just another plot if you can limit it to the idea of two people falling in love, if they have ever fallen in love, right? You have this love interest thing that you're familiar with, okay? So as the story opens, Wiltshire is arriving at the island of Falesa in the South Seas. He has come to this small island as a trader, right? Wishing to trade copra made from coconut shells for various goods not available on the. He's just another British trader. So it's not about him going there because business is okay, trade is okay. It's about what happens after, right? Just to remember the beginning of the story and how it started. Just to remember the description. Just to remember how it all started. Yeah, tell me about it. Tell me about the introduction. Yeah, I'm talking about the description of the island, right? The description was kind of what? Was it fascinating enough? Just to remember. Tell me about it. What is it that he was describing? He was describing the island, obviously, from afar, from on board the boat or the ship that he was on, obviously. Obviously, he started like everybody else. I mean, like any other writer who would be fascinated by places that he never went to, and he's trying to recapture that to the reader, right? So don't you think that the description was more, I mean, of the romantic type? So let me share with you what I'm trying to get at. I'm trying to get at the fact that you wouldn't have any clue that he's going to change the way he did over the course of the novel. I mean, the description at the beginning promises you to have a novel that is just like, or I'm like another, just like any other novel. You wouldn't have clues that indicate that we are in for different stuff, right? Did you get that? Mm, okay. So he has come to this small island as a trader. Yes, like Noof is saying, the beginning or the start of the novel was typical. Wiltshire does not know the local language, and surprisingly seems to not even know that 100% of his trade will be copra for his various goods. Nor do we know why he has come to this tiny island to begin with. This was the question of one of you. Somebody says, why? Why did he go to Sama, or to this particular island, and not somewhere else? Again, whether he went to this place, it's an island. He may have gone to another island, which is also part of the South Seas. It wouldn't make any difference because obviously all the islands, I mean, share the same characteristics. They would look alike, right? So the question would be, why leave England? Why leave the mainstream and go to the unfamiliar, right? That would be a better way of putting it. Okay, so what happens after? The ship will be met by another white trader, British trader by the name of Case. And over time, we'll see what Case is all about. I mean, devilish and evil as he is. So the ship is met by Case, the other trader on the island, who obviously has been there for a long time and controls all trade on the island. Case speaks the native language, while Wiltshire, of course, does not. And Wiltshire, we get to know that he is replacing another trader who couldn't perhaps take it any longer, or I mean, he was obviously failed. With the guidance of Case, Wiltshire is married to the most beautiful woman on the island and sets up in his trading post. Okay, so is it a trap? Is it a setup that Case is kind of doing or making? This will be answered later. So things, however, do not go well, and the natives will not trade with Wiltshire. Remember that somehow Case will, I mean, kind of spread the rumor that there is a curse of a sort that is plaguing and infecting both Uma and Wiltshire, and they would decide, the natives would decide not to deal with them, whether on the human level or on the business level. So things, however, do not go well, and the natives will not trade with Wiltshire. he's going to this is going to be baffling to him. Why are they treating me the way they do? They don't want to have anything to do with me. A Protestant missionary will come over, and they are going to explain it. They are going to tell him that Case has let it be known that a curse in on Wiltshire because of his wife Uma. And this is, of course, we're going to discover that this was all designed so that Wiltshire will lose all hope and give up, and perhaps kind of pack up his tent and leave. But he didn't, obviously. So see how simple the plot is? You don't have so many complications. Even when Wiltshire normalizes his relationship with Uma, and they become, perhaps good couple, and they would have kids and all these kinds of things. You don't have much complication. It's just another life lived by a couple who happens to be racially different. They are going to even have kids, and you don't have complications on the level of events. Complications take place on the level of issues. Interracial marriage, Wiltshire and his biases, white as he is, in spite of the fact that he has kids who are half native, he still does not find it in his heart to acknowledge natives, acknowledge them in the sense of, giving them their due in terms of, mental capabilities and skills. He denies them that, in spite of the fact that he is part of them now. He is now married to one of their women. Okay. That would also bring us to the idea of contact zones. And contact zone or zones is a concept that a critic by the name of Mary Louise Pratt came out with. And obviously she wasn't talking about the novel in particular. She was talking in general terms. And somehow what she says applies to the novel. She says that, normally in islands like these, these places have, beaches and other meeting areas where both the natives and the foreigners meet, and they start somehow an ongoing conversation. This conversation would mean that they deal with each other, they trade stuff, and sometimes they go beyond what is business and what is practical, and they involved in relationships, getting married from each other, for example. One side gets affected by the religion of the other, and that side would embrace the religion of the other side. So the American linguist and critic Mary Louise Pratt used the term contact zone to refer to social places where cultures meet, clash, and grapple with each other, often in contexts of highly asymmetrical relations of power. Okay, these are, these contact zones are normally possible, and they happen in contexts where you normally have colonizations and slavery. If you think of this, it applies to the novel, where you have the island, you have the beaches of the island, where, I mean, traders and natives meet and they exchange goods. And you have all kinds of human encounter. At one point they are happy with each other, getting married to from each other or to each other. Sometimes there are clashes, cultural clashes. uh, um, it's all kinds of human interaction that you're having. So do we have a contact zone in the beaches, the beach of Felicia? Yes, we do have that. Again, not all the encounters are honey and milk, right? Like I said, they can develop friendships. They can develop even love and admiration for each other. But sometimes it's not uh, um, always like this. There are clashes and conflicts. And one big example of that would be both the character of Case and the character of Wiltshire. So in a contact zone, people try to compromise. They try to come to a middle ground. In our case, in the case of Case, he doesn't do that. He is dictatorial. He exploits people. Okay, so the relationship is doesn't have fairness. He's not fair to it, right? Even Wiltshire is also showing signs of bias and prejudice. So it is true that he is part of the culture on account of his marriage to a local, but he doesn't acknowledge that this relationship is perhaps based on equality, where the two sides are equal. No, he thinks that he is superior. Even and this is going to be seen and heard and felt from his revelations. At one point he would have an encounter with his wife, and they will talk about the future of his daughters, and he would simply say that he doesn't want them to get married to locals. Okay, so they themselves are half locals or half native. So if anything, this shows you how biased uh, he is. He couldn't uh, uh, perhaps overcome his biases, the biases that he came with, for all the long time that he spent on the island. Okay. So Wiltshire's racial prejudices are clear towards the end of the novella, especially when using the term Kanaks and half-castes when referring to his wife and daughters. Yeah, he wouldn't even, white as he is, British as he is, arrogant as he is, he wouldn't even spare his own household from his criticism and biases, and we'll discuss kinds of his wife and his daughters. He still can't wrap his head around the fact that his daughters might marry Kanaks, and he wonders where can I find white so that I can marry them off to my daughters. So Wiltshire is unapologetic about his prejudice. I mean, sometimes you come to your senses and you say, hey, what am I saying? These are my kids, my own flesh and blood. Why am I being biased like that? I mean, he wasn't unapologetic. I mean, he kept behaving the way he did. Wiltshire is unapologetic about his prejudice, reflecting the prejudices of many Victorian British traders, settlers, and immigrants. Okay, so in terms of structure and techniques, you're going to find that the Beach of Falesa is it is divided into 5 chapters, and they say that it has a hybrid form. Hybrid means that it is cross-generic, in perhaps the same way that Wuthering Heights was. Remember when we spoke about Wuthering Heights and we saw that it is cross-generic? Another word for cross-generic would be the word hybrid. Hybrid means that you have elements from different genres. So what are the different genres that we have? You have elements of romance. You have elements of realism. This is the hybridity that we talk about. Okay, you can I mean, feel and sense hybridity everywhere in every corner of the novel. Let me put it this way. The language is hybrid. I mean, it's both standard English and pidgin English, right? The characters are hybrid, right? You have English characters and you have native characters, right? So what is more hybrid than the daughters of Wiltshire himself? Remember, they are half British, half native, right? Okay, so again, there is a mixture of realism and romance. There is an element of supernatural to the novel. We also talk about it in the sense that it has adventures, and this is also a measure of romance to the novel. The opening section first uses the romance of the first encounter with the Pacific island, and then a realist account of the ocean. So he starts off using the romance techniques in perhaps description and highlighting what is exotic about the island, and then step by step we are involved in realistic events and action, and this is the realist part to it. Again, it can be a hybrid in the sense that it is realistic, it has elements of romance, it has elements of adventure to it. It is also travel writing, right? Okay, so let's talk about other elements of hybridity in the Beach of Falesa. Again, when we speak about the language, this is hybrid. You have both British English, Standard English, and Pidgin English. And Pidgin English would be a mix between the two. So in his essay, The Foreigner at Home, see, even the title of his essay is very significant. He's saying you can be at home, but you have feelings of foreignness. Foreignness here means that you don't feel that you belong. You're at home physically, but you belong somewhere else, or perhaps you're not. You're an outfit. Okay, an outfit means that you don't feel that you belong. Okay, and sometimes you are abroad, but you feel at home. You feel familiar. And this is what is happening with him. When he was in England, I'm talking about Stevenson, he wasn't obviously not very happy. That's why he left everything behind and left for the South Seas, right? Over there, he stays there and he is experimenting with the novel techniques and realism. It seems that he felt comfortable out there. Okay? So what does he say? He says or contends that it is not only when we cross the seas that we go abroad. What do you think of this? It's a very significant statement. It is not only when we cross the seas that we go abroad. Do you agree with this? Okay, so abroad here means has negative connotations and negative associations. So you can be at home and you feel abroad in a negative sense. You don't feel that you belong. You don't have to travel so that we can say that he feels homesick or he doesn't feel okay. Or, no, you can be home and you have abroad sensations. You don't belong. You're not treated well. You're poor. You're not given opportunities that you deserve, right? Okay. He says that places like Ireland and Wales and the Scottish mountains still cling to their old Gaelic speech. You can make them home all you like, but they still have perhaps they are having their minds and hearts set somewhere else in the remote past of their ancestors and their forefathers. So it's not about kind of imposing your concepts of others on others. So parts of the novella are not written in the standard literary English found in serialized fiction. Makes sense. He simply says, I wouldn't use standard literary language because I'm trying to recapture the language that people in these places are using. And obviously they are not using standard English. They are using a language that is a mix between native local dialects and English. The result is obviously a corrupt kind of English. I mean, English with heavy accent, English whose grammar is not correct in the traditional sense. This is the language that people speak. Yes, absolutely, Qamar. So Stevenson uses dialect and slang, whether it is Polynesian or Samoan, in his narrative. Again, to give a sense of realism. So Stevenson's story attempts realistically to represent a new, evolving and still unstable dialect of English, which is, like we said, Pidgin English. Pidgin English, for those who don't know what Pidgin English is, a new language, not new anymore, that emerged out of the trading relationships on the beach between different communities, whether they are American, Chinese, European, and of course with them the local Pacific dialects and languages. So lots of people across the world use Pidgin English. So Pidgin English is not limited or confined to one regional or one geographical location. Any group of people in any given part of the world who use a mix of English and local languages is said to be speaking Pidgin English. And they use it as a lingua franca. Perhaps from your language courses you know what a lingua franca is. Lingua franca means a language of communication. You normally have so many languages around in a given country, so people agree on one single language that everybody uses so that communication can be easy. Okay. Yani look at the world nowadays. You have so many languages, right? But people in the different parts of the world agreed to make English their lingua franca, right? Arabic at one point was the lingua franca of the entire world, right? When Arabs were ruling the world, so everybody was kind of trying to learn their language. Okay, so in order to ease communication, everybody was speaking Arabic. India, for example, India has so many, and correct me if I'm wrong, has so many languages, and obviously the lingua franca in India would be Arabic. I'm sorry, not Arabic, would be English, and to a lesser degree would be Urdu. Do we have Indians in class? Do we have people from India that can help us with this? Yeah, Arch is Indian, right? So Arch, what is the lingua franca in India? Is it Hindu or English? Um, did you get my question? Did you hear my question, yeah, Arch? Okay. Perhaps you've been away from India for quite some time. You don't know. Okay. Who can we ask? Oh, okay. But at least you're getting the idea of lingua franca, right? Okay. I'll give you another vivid example. Yeah, this is what I'm saying. This is exactly what I'm saying, Arch. That's why in this case, English is the lingua franca in India. Even here in Saudi Arabia in the Gulf, we have Pidgin Arabic. So it's not Pidgin English, it's Pidgin Arabic, where you normally see people who don't speak Arabic. Okay, they use Arabic but with an accent. And then we, as Arab, when we speak with them, instead of using proper Arabic, we use this Arabic with an accent with them. Are you getting the idea? Okay, good. Perhaps this has taken so long. I mean, I was trying to kind of explaining it. I'm hopeful that I'm not overdoing it. Then it can be sometimes counterproductive if you over explain something. It gives you the opposite, I mean, effect. You're after something, but you over explaining can be counterproductive sometimes. Anyway. So you see how nice the novel is, or the novella is. So in spite of the fact that it is short and everything, easily digestible, but it has so many philosophical underpinnings, if you like. I'm hopeful that you're sharing the same impressions and feelings. Do you find it interesting? What do you think? Not, no, no. I'm not. I'm not talking about clarity, Asara. I'm talking about whether it is interesting and engaging or not. Okay, Kamar is saying that the idea that approach turns into whom she finds it interesting. That's fascinating and interesting. Okay. So obviously we will not be able to finish everything today. The plan was for us to finish it off today or tonight, but it's okay. We're not, like I said, we're not hard hard pressed against time yet. So when we meet again this week, we'll finish it inshallah off, so that we can move somewhere else and do something else. I'll give you 2 minutes for questions if you have any before I call it a night. If you have any questions, you guys have 2 minutes from now. Okay, so on this note and with this item, we come to the end of today's or tonight's class. I'll see you also this week, inshallah, for the second class. And until then, I wish you all the best.